council meeting, and I was sitting with a group of folks, and they said, we know the technology's changing. We know what we've got isn't going to cut it moving forward. Problem is, we don't know who's out there and what they've got. And that led to the development of PartnerTech X and everything that happened there. I think the big challenge is going to be, how do you move the business model? How do you deal with the factors around that? If you move to a consumption model or an outcome-based model, one of the key people that you're going to have to bring to the table is the CFO, because suddenly they're going to have a bill that is not predetermined, that is not, this is what it's going to be this month. It's based on consumption, or it's based on outcomes. And so it's going to be variable. That's going to be a huge challenge. It's going to pose a huge challenge for the partner community in terms of how that works. And so I think there are other issues. Everyone, I think now, most of the major companies know this is happening. They understand they have to be part of it. Some are doing it very well. Some are doing it not so well. Some are really struggling. Some, like Zoom, have done an amazing job of leveraging the AI revolution. What you've also got to look at is the back end. And within all of this, I think one of the things we've got to look at is how do we bring the CFO on board inside our customers, inside our own companies, because at the moment, with the way the market is, they have enormous power, and they understand they have a goal to drive their companies forward. And so there needs to be that. I think AI is going to make it a much deeper conversation between the ecosystem and finance in terms of where we're headed and how we bring those things together.
Yeah. By the way, and just to add on to your story, I mean, I think I saw you get really excited with when NVIDIA demoed their General Motors avatar that they brought, right? And you brought that excitement to the conference, and you shared that with the conference. And I remember that being kind of a light bulb moment for a lot of people in the room, right? Nick, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No.
Yeah. Nick, what about you?
I think what I would encourage, Rod talked about the internal constituents you need to work with. Don't underestimate your partner community and the power of partner advisory councils and getting out to events. You know, I'll share an observation I had at my partner advisory council last year when we launched AI Companion. And one of our largest partners, someone who's been with us since the early UCAS days, said to me, this feels like when we moved from PBXs to the cloud.
Yeah.
Everybody's curious.
Yeah.
Nobody's ready. And 6 months from now, everybody will pretend they saw it coming, right? So it's like, how do you bring these people along? And, you know, that stuck with me because I can go back in my career, and I know many of the participants can. I go back to my Polycom days. I'll take you back to 2017 when we were on-prem, building big immersive studios, and I could charge outrageous PS revenue to mediate rooms for earthquakes, and we pivoted from on-prem to cloud and became that endpoint, and it was no longer a luxury add-on, but a necessity. So same movie, different cast. The pattern never changes.
Yeah.
The acceleration changes and the technology shifts, but the objections sound familiar. Partners who lean in early rewrite the playbooks for everybody else, as Rod alluded to. And I'll share with you in early, it was late March, we did our analyst conference. And we were doing a panel, which Rod knows I love doing panels, and those of you who see me on panels. And one of the analysts said, Nick, which competitor do you fear the most? And I said, honestly, I don't fear any competitor. What I fear is the ability for the community to embrace the change at the acceleration that we need to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And that to me is and we'll come back and talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But at Zoom, when we stopped talking about AI as a feature and started showing it as a workflow, that's when partners saw meetings, messages, and customer interactions all feeding one intelligent system of action. And that's when it clicked. The conversation moved from what is this to how fast can I build it? And this is where we're going to see this emergence. And Rod talked about it a little bit. The delivery of AI services, it's going to fundamentally change the delivery model. You're going to have more influencers. You're going to have more partners engaged in action, and it's going to change that economic value proposition. But just a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. Okay. Let's go on to the next segment. So those are the stories. We just covered the stories that made that pattern real for each of us, but I want to get into the evidence. So let me walk you through some of the data, and then, I'll give each one of you a piece, and, maybe you could put it in context for us. So the first piece of evidence is what I call the incumbent comfort trap, and then the pivot test that comes after it. So the comfort trap, right? Siebel had 45% market share in 2002, Fortune's fastest growing company in 1999. But by January 2005, the IDC was calling them a sitting duck, right? Oracle acquired them for $5.8 billion that September. It was totally a salvage deal, certainly not a triumph. 3 years from, sitting pretty to, closeout. Now, the SaaS apocalypse hit between January and February, roughly $2 trillion in software market cap erased. Salesforce down 28% in 48 hours. Atlassian down 35%. By March, the SaaS sector was trading below the S&P 500 for the first time in the cloud era. But then around April 13th, we see that V-shaped rebound. ServiceNow and Oracle led it by introducing agentic ACV, outcome-based pricing, which Jason, you spoke about, for this AI completed work. So Nick, you're inside one of the vendors that pivoted. You just mentioned it. Walk us through that, what that decision looked like at Zoom. How did you decide between bolting AI on and rethinking the platform? And what are you watching, from vendors who took the bolt-on route? What are you seeing from them?
I think the easy path would have been to bolt AI onto existing products and treat it like another feature, release it and call it innovation, right? But the platform, it's changing the workflow. And that's what our teams did with AI Companion. And more importantly, a federated AI architecture, where we built kind of this semantic layer that understands the context across meetings, chat, phone, docs, customer interaction. So it meant rewriting how data moves through the system, so AI can turn conversations into completed work and not just summaries. And that's where it gets really interesting, because from a product portfolio, this is why we separated product like our virtual agent from our contact center, in that the concept is not to replace the human. The concept is to augment the human's productivity, to make AI a first-class citizen, not a widget.
Yeah.
It was a structural decision and not a marketing one. So, be careful of those bolt-ons. So what I'm watching now from vendors who took the bolt-on route is the same thing we saw in the early SaaS era. Fragmentation, the ability to charge more. You can feel it in the customer experience. And that's where AI lives in a sidebar, not in a workflow. It's clever, but it's not transformative. And so when you look at those adoption rates of AI and our approach of bundling it with full license and making it part of the workflow, where others have chosen to charge for it. So the real pivot happens when AI stops being a feature and starts being the operating system of how things get done. And that's the difference, really, Cosmo, between adding intelligence and becoming intelligent. And that's the really cool piece at Zoom that I love. It drives my partner community crazy. Like, I can't keep up with you. You're announcing so many features so fast. But that, fundamentally starts with Eric on down, is that paranoia of missing the window.
Yeah.
And we often joke internally, there's regular time and there's Zoom time. And Zoom time goes at a quantum to regular time. And that's the really cool thing that I love about what I get an opportunity to do. And I get many of our partners like, hey, can I have a roadmap? I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen, because at the rate of innovation, we're just going to try to keep you informed of what we're doing.
Yeah, I got to say, I was shocked at how quickly Zoom made that massive transformation, that massive change, because I was watching other, vendors bolt on. We're seeing it every day. We're still seeing the bolt-ons every day. And when, we talked last year, I think it was like almost a year ago when you were already, sharing some of these changes, and I couldn't believe how quickly Zoom had pivoted. So, kudos to you guys, but are there what structurally, if you're allowed to tell us, is, what did Zoom do to accelerate the way they did?
I think it's understanding how to take that conversation to completion, and the analytics that come with the conversation, and this emerging economy of what I call AI services, right? If you think about that agentic model and taking to completion, that's where the community has to build the agents. The community has to, and that's that whole new economic value proposition. So it's creating a federated approach of having a single platform that understands that productivity suite. That was kind of the turning point for us, and where obviously meetings, we understand that flow. It's the heart of the meetings platform. 3 years now into CX and on the Gartner Magic Quadrant, with over 2,500 customers now on the platform in 3 years. It's Zoom Phone now over 10 million users. It's how do you connect the pieces, which is an example of, we could have done bolt-ons with all three.
Yeah.
But we did it cross-platform. So that conversation and the analytics and being able to create that completion.
Yeah.
And it's not resting. It's not, I don't want to be a Siebel. I don't want to be a 3Com. I don't want to be a Palm. I don't want to be a US Robotics. All in my DNA. It's like learning from your experience, and accelerating that change.
Yeah, and I don't want to pull the headline too quickly, but this keeps emerging, right? This is an operating model shift, a product, rethinking your product fundamentally, right? And then an economic model shift as well, right? So it really is completely transforming your business. It's not about adding this AI as tools, right? And so there's a lot of work to be done. Okay. So then let me move to the second piece of evidence. This one is really about the objections themselves that I already mentioned. So whether they're real and how long, they're going to last. And, you guys have already mentioned that maybe we're not seeing that many objections anymore, but I will, there are still some that I know are hanging around. So the SaaS objections were legitimate in 2002. The three things converged, right? Broadband, virtualization, and browser maturity. And so by 2009, Salesforce crossed $1 billion in revenue. Now, AI objections are also legitimate, hallucinations, privacy, and auditability, really specifically. And, Klarna got that wrong on their first try. They had 2.3 million AI conversations, and they replaced 700 agents and reported $40 million in impact. Then satisfaction dropped, and the CEO, had to publicly course correct. The interesting part isn't that humans came back. To me, it's how they came back. Klarna runs a hybrid model now. AI handles the routine inquiries while humans handle the escalation, and the humans are flexible contract. They're not full-time anymore. So Gartner's predicting that half the organizations that planned big customer service workforce cuts will abandon those plans by 2007, and most will end up where Klarna did. So, Jason, when you're talking to portfolio companies, what are there still AI objections that you're hearing? What are the ones that you hear the most? And how do you answer it now versus how you maybe answered it, 18 months ago?
So I think the macro change in how people are starting to approach AI, and I think it should continue to accelerate, is if we rewound the clock a year ago, if I pull in an old school analogy, if you have a big enough hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think that was the approach. Largely, you can make an argument driven by marketing hype that people were taking with AI. The Klarna example is a great one. AI gave them this big hammer that they could do fairly drastic cuts across the board. The reality is, like any other tool, there's a time and a place. And I think we are starting to get to a place where the fidelity of the conversations we're having about AI is much greater, and the applicability of AI as a, granted, very powerful tool for specific tasks is changing. So if you look at AI and sort of where the market, the sort of overall market has come to, we are realizing that AI is very good at certain things by design. It's very good at manipulating text, as an example. So if you think about text manipulation and predictability around, vectorized text as a core competency of AI, guess what? The floor of certain vertical markets has started to raise. Legal tech, historically a very bad market, at least from an investor perspective for SaaS, has become arguably the best market for AI, because that now much more specific hammer of AI as a tool is such an empowering tool in that world where, fundamentally lawyers are all about not ripping you off 15 minutes at a time, but manipulating text and understanding sort of patterns associated with written word, right? So I think where the market has evolved is getting to that place where the specificity of the value of AI is starting to be applied in an equally specific and high fidelity manner to specific problems. The pattern that I see is actually not SaaS per se, but mobile. I think the last big technological shift that I saw in my career was the emergence of mobile. And generation one, big hammer, everything is a nail, was just taking all these SaaS applications and squishing down the user experience into a tiny screen. What it manifested there was minimal value to customers. But the second generation of mobile applications actually took a step back and said, mobile is an empowering tool and an empowering technology platform. There are specific use cases, contexts that couldn't be done before, couldn't be reached for customers, on the go or on the toilet, you can make an argument. And those new generation of applications were the ones that manifested the most value. A consumer example would be GPS-enabled maps applications like a Waze or like a Google Maps. And I think we're on the cusp of getting to that sort of mass market understanding of the applicability and specificity of where AI can be the ideal tool to solve problems that weren't solved in the past.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a huge, of course, it's so obvious, but you just kind of blew my mind. I totally see that movie too. And you're right, mobile AI for me hasn't really hit my mobile device as much. I'm crazy with it on the desktop, right? I use it every day, all day long, but on my mobile device, I'm still using it, discreetly, right? Excellent point. Okay, so third beat, Rod, I always come back to you for those financial, because I know those financial discussions, because I know you love talking about the CFO, how important it is. The dot, I just want to make sure we're still recording. All right, so in 2001, the dot-com bust killed the justification for on-prem CapEx, right? So every CFO suddenly had a board mandate to find cost. Concur completed its SaaS pivot by 2005 because of that pressure, not in spite of it. So, now we've got this post zero interest rate period, right? Margin pressure is doing the same thing right now. AI isn't being sold as innovation. It's being sold as cost structure. Same conversation that flipped buyers from Siebel to Salesforce. So Rod, have you seen, a channel executive flip from exploring to AI to need AI now specifically because of margin pressure? Or, what do you think the CFOs are saying? What's your perspective on all this?
CFOs are under pressure. The CFOs in our industry are under pressure. They're under severe pressure. And they're under pressure from, if you take the tech industry, they're under pressure from a number of different directions. If you look at the amount of money that the major players are investing in AI, the Microsofts, the AWS, NVIDIA, etc. And a lot of that investment is circular. If you look, for example, at Azure, and you look at the commit, 40% of Azure's commit is actually OpenAI, which Microsoft have invested a vast amount of money in. Right. OpenAI are buying a gazillion, or responsible for the purchase of a gazillion chips. Lo and behold, NVIDIA is investing in OpenAI also. So we have, I personally think we are in a dot-com bubble. That doesn't mean that AI is going to fail. You brought up basically the dot-com and what happened. The same will happen with AI. There are numerous companies, I'm sure Jason can talk about this more effectively than I can, where there have been huge investments. Companies like Zoom will thrive and do extraordinarily well. For every Zoom, there will be 10,000 AI companies that go bust. There will be, if you look at, for example, again, OpenAI, before the issue with Iran, Deutsche Bank did an analysis and they reckoned it would cost another $143 billion before OpenAI might break even in 2030. That is 7 times more than the next most expensive investment in a company before it broke even. Not 1.5 times, not double, but 7 times. The amount of money is just extraordinary. And so I think we're going to see a whole bunch of people saying, I told you so. Look at what happened. Look at the bubble. Look at it bursting. AI is not there. No, that's the wrong message. What the message is, it's happening. It's going to happen. The CFOs are under huge pressure to make it happen because they need to make it happen, because the first company that does it, everyone else has to follow. They have no option. And so you're going to see a very, very significant number of impacts on the financial markets and on what's happening as we move forward. What's going to result from that is the winners will emerge, and they will be even stronger than they were before.
Jason, I saw you nodding. Is there anything you want to add to that? Because I have a little addition too, I think.
Well, I think Rod is, on the money with his commentary. I think it's important to decouple 2 separate conversations. Conversation number 1 is inevitable, which is AI is an enabling technology and capability that will bring immense value to companies, people, so on and so forth. Really, the question is, going back to the dot-com, movie that we've seen, is who's going to be the Amazon, and then who will be the rest. The second conversation, which Rod touched on, which maybe strikes a different kind of nerve, is the financial markets conversation around AI. The fact that the valuation of, the hyperscalers and the foundational model providers is contingent on, the arithmetic that everybody in the world will use it at a certain rate, that's a different conversation altogether that I think obscures and clouds the value conversation, which, at least knock on wood, for most people is the more valuable one versus sort of the financialization conversation.
Yeah. What I'm noticing, especially as I go in to talk to, we do a lot of business with mid-market, all the way from lower mid-market to upper mid-market. When I'm speaking to those CFOs and CEOs, they've tried this before. You guys have already mentioned it. There's a lot of failure rates happening in terms of pilots and this pivot. So they knew they had to do it. They started doing it, but we know the reasons. I could touch on bad data and infrastructure and change management, all the things. And these are all the services we provide, but the services that all these other providers are going to start bringing to the table around AI. But what I'm noticing is that you can't afford too many failures. Time is crushing people. You're losing a lot of ground. I think it was Harvey, the legal software, right, that raised $11 billion to pursue AI, built their entire AI solution, like say Zoom did, but they weren't successful like Zoom. They just pulled that back and I think dropped it 3 weeks ago. They pulled that product because the big models, I think it was OpenAI, was already doing a better job than their trained legal models on their platform. So $11 billion raised, huge product failure, no traction in the market, and how much ground have they lost? So now they're pivoting to services. So we're going to see a lot of that in those crashes. We're going to see a lot of messy scenarios, right, with companies as they're pivoting.